Release the Kraken!
Greetings, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lame Duck Studios, and today we're looking at another exciting devlog for Rocket Flip. You guys been following along. You know that I've been working on it for the last like 10 days or so, trying to crunch it down through the tail end of my vacation and get this polished up. I had a lot of great progress. My vacation officially ended um, on August 1st, which was Monday, and technically I'm working now, but come next Wednesday, I will officially have students and my time will be more limited. But we can take a look at what I've accomplished. So a bunch of stuff has happened throughout the game. I really restructured a lot in terms of how the menus work and our level system. So for example, if we go to our missions here, I went ahead and added an extra level, so now we have a total of 6, which was a goal. And then for our actual missions, we now have pages. Hey! So there are a bunch of missions. Also, with a bit of feedback, I did rearrange the buttons. I kept getting suggestions that it was just more natural to have play on the right and back on the left, so I went ahead and swapped those. And that's consistent through all of our menus. Still working on achievements and settings. Those are not quite done yet. Those are still as they are. I have a bunch of achievements on my list, and the icons have to get done. And then the real big thing is on the ship hangar. This is the new layout, and we have our ships. Now, I don't have all the ships loaded in. You'll see in a clip right here that I do have a lot more ships, and they are all nice and textured and polished up. And if we take a look at the objects here in the player, we have a few, right? We have our classic firecracker, standard old rocket, good old pal, thunder flipper, great for ladders, little pepper. This one is kind of like a mix between the firecracker and the thunder flipper. It has the same kind of thrust as the thunder flipper with a little quicker of a rotation rate. We also have the Stout Cruiser, which is a slow and steady ship, but easily controlled. My personal favorite, the flying saucer here. I know, it's not a rocket. My wife was complaining about that. It's not a rocket! Yes, it's true. But it is pretty awesome, and it's a staple when you have aliens, right? Everybody has a flying saucer. And then we have the classic lander. This one's been in the game for quite a while, but it didn't have a paint job. So I went ahead and painted it up, gave it a texture and some detailing. And it's pretty neat. And all the ships behave a little bit different. If you look at the menu here, you can see there's some different traits and they have some different functionality. And they all kind of stem from a main parent. And you can see we're inside the parent here. We have a rocket, the camera, and then the base collision bodies, and any base variables that it would have. So all those are from the parent, and then if I were to make a child object, the child inherits all of those things, and I can just plug and play what I need. There is some downside to that, which is that some things, kind of like the flying saucer here, doesn't quite fit the collision body layout, and so I have to do some modifications for how the collision bodies works. So that's like one of those things that's bad about inheritance. If you inherit things that you don't necessarily need or that you need to redo, you have to find a way to get rid of those and add the new things in. So sometimes it's better to just make a whole new thing, a whole new entity or object, and build it from scratch. But then I have to go and re-get all the functionality for how it flips and all the balances and all that good stuff. So it's a double-edged sword. And the way the menus read and the way the player controller reads, it's all looking for a rocket parent. So since all of these are children of the rocket parent, you can see up here that they are from a rocket parent class, right? Rocket parent class. And our rocket parent does not have a rocket parent class. It is extended from the pawn class. So when I look at the player pawn I'm going for is my rocket parent, and then that kind of branches into the different children. So that's how that's structured. So if I were to just make a whole new entity, I'd also have to make a whole new setup for how the player controller communicates to that object. So for example, if I jump into the player controller, right in here, right here I'm doing a cast to the parent, and because all of these are essentially the child of the parent, it doesn't matter who I'm casting to. I'm just casting to the active pawn that is of type rocket parent. If I wanted to create another one, I'd have to branch this and split it off and have a way of checking both. And it just adds a level of complexity because anything that searches for this object would also then have to search for that other object, and it would just add a whole new layer. So it's just easier to keep everything in one family, which is usually how things go, especially when you have things that have a lot of encapsulation, like Unreal does. Everything's encapsulated, which can be a blessing and a curse. That's a different debate. So where am I at in terms of getting this polished up and released? Well, remember how I said inside of the hangar here that there are supposed to be more ships? You saw in the example that there are. Well, something broke. So it just happened to be that that on Sunday, which was July 31st, I was working and tuning some things up. I was actually working on the flying saucer at the time and fixing some menus. And I went to save and do a backup, like I usually do. If you look at my list of backups, I make quite a few. Each one of these is about 20 gigs, right? Well, I happen to run out of hard drive space. So here's my storage E, and you can see that I'm at 185. This was I was down to 1 gig, and I got a hard drive full error, and I was like, crap. Well, I need to make sure that I can save the project. So I had to go and remove a bunch of stuff. You can see I have 180 gigs there available because I removed a bunch of things so I have room to save. But at some point in there, I guess something got corrupted, and I have this error that I can't seem to get rid of. I've been looking on the boards here. You can actually see here's my response, and you can read it, or you can go look for Selden G on Unreal Forums to read the whole thing. That it kind of explains what's kind of going on. And I went through a bunch of these to try to find somebody who had a similar experience of the particular error that I'm having. I've had corrupted blueprints before, and one of the downsides of working in Blueprint versus working in code. So when you're working in actual code, you can hit clean build, and it'll dump all the memory and then rebuild everything, recompile everything from the beginning. So if there was something bad in memory that was from a memory leak or a bad reference somewhere, that gets wiped and the whole project gets regenerated, which is great when you're writing directly in C++. When you're working in a visual scripting package, all of those coded bubbles, all those blueprint bubbles, these are built on top of some code. At that point, the bubble is really just kind of captured in memory, and if it screws up, there's no way of clearing it. There is if you look for refresh nodes, this kind of sort of sometimes helps, but it doesn't. If you have broken nodes and you hit refresh nodes, it doesn't do anything. It just kind of it flickers. Maybe one thing refreshes, and you have to go manually refresh every node. The easiest way to restore one of these nodes is to go break the connections or recall the node all over again. So I can do a cast to rocket parent, and this one will come in fresh because it's a new entity in memory. It gets a new memory block, and then I can delete this one off and rehook everything up, and that usually clears some things. But like if something gets really corrupt, it can extend through a bunch of other things. And since everything's encapsulated inside of Unreal as its own, every object is its own entity, right? That's the problem with encapsulation. Every object is its own entity, and every object, if it needs to communicate to another object, needs to have a reference of that object. And if the other object needs to communicate, it needs a reference of it as well. And you have to cross-reference objects. Well, if one of those references goes bad, it may just be that one, or it may be the root reference and all of them are bad. And there's no good way of really fixing that in Blueprint. I can't hit clean build and restore everything. There are a few tricks you can do to try to mitigate that. And you're like, well, well, you have backups, right? You can go to your backups. I do have backups. But these backups, and you can see the dates on here, from backup 6 through backup 3, even though these are different days that I did not have this error, these are corrupt too. I assume they're corrupt because I was probably having that hard drive problem a lot earlier on and didn't notice. But the problem for some reason didn't show up during these days. So the cleanest build that I have is on this copy 2 here, which is about 4 days, 4 days of work behind. And I've been trying to move assets over. I've been testing everything back and forth. And what you have to do, unfortunately, is to go through and manually connect a bunch of nodes and rebuild all your references, which I did. I went through and did that for a few hours on Monday. And then I built it, and then everything was working. And then when I closed the project and reopened it, the problem was back, which if you look at all of these, they're the same. They're like, everybody has that same problem. Some say it's a glitch, some say it's not, but look, this is back in 4.7. I'm all the way in 4.24. So evidently it's still there, right? Well, why don't I go to 4.26? Well, I can't go to 4.26 because they changed some things in C++, and it doesn't directly go from 4.26 to, or 4.24 to 4.26. I have to either do a workaround to get the C++ compile to build, or I have to rewrite my code. Essentially, I open the project and copy and paste my code in, and then do a rebuild that way. I can do that, but there's no direct path. So whenever I try to build out, I get an error and it stops. So there's that issue. Now I was able to work the problem down to my shop item. So you saw that the shop was the thing that was missing. So through the process of meticulously loading one blueprint at a time and test playing it, I was able to find a very consistent break where everything would crash, which was on my shop structures here. So one quirk in Unreal is whenever you have a structure as a blueprint, and so here's the shop structure and how the item kind of works. Whenever you have a structure, they're a bit twitchy in Blueprint. If you make it, it's fine. If you call to it, it's fine. If you reference it, it's fine. If you make it and then later on, after you have references to it, and you make a change to your structure, everything gets screwed up. It's a known thing, and so it's recommended to make changes to your structures as a last resort. Plan them out ahead of time, have them dynamically build to kind of get around that. And this one, so this is the structure of this. This hasn't changed. But the actual shop structure itself, this is the one where I load each individual item in. So you can see there's only 3 items here. Okay. Here's 3 items, 3 items. When I go to add the other items in, I get an error. So right now, everything's playing. I have the 3 items in. This is the original one that has no changes to it. Okay. And I'll just go ahead and through the motions and show you. I'm going to go ahead and exit without saving here. Let me take these. Let me see. This is this one, and this is the copy. I have to go back and see which one has it. This one says old, broken. Okay, so this is the broken one. I'm going to take the shop structure out. And then I'm going to take the broken structure. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that in. And this is the one that has all of them on it. And actually to show you, just before I go into that, let me bring shop structure back. And I'll rerun it so you can see. With them both in there, it's going to grab the one that works, and then the other one it's going to ignore. There we go. The one that has the hyphen broken, its namespace doesn't match the other one, so it should still play without crashing. So played, no crash. But now you can take a look at the other structure. So here's shop structure. Here's the original. And then here is the one that has all of the other ships on it. You can see that these are still here. All the data is still here. So it's physically there, right? It's great. It's available. Okay, now I'm going to exit, go back into my content here. Data. I'm going to take the good one out, make sure I'm in the right spot. Yeah, good one is out. I'm going to rename this one so it will be taken. Okay, I'll just go ahead and reload. And if I hit play, it's going to crash. Give it a second. Bam, crashed. Here's the error, and then it says the array is out of bounds. I know what an out of bounds array is. I just don't know why I'm getting the error. I'm guessing, as things go with Unreal, when you make a modification to the structure, okay, and everything else is referencing it, you have to go through and manually compile each freaking blueprint that calls a reference to that asset, or destroy and recreate every reference of that asset. So I've tried a few different routes. I keep getting this error. I've even tried building out on an older file that was working to see if the error was there, and it was on one of them. It was a slightly different error, but it kind of pointed the same thing with the array being out of bounds. Up until I can solve that, I really can't go forward on the project, which sucks because I was really excited. I was so close, and then of course it would break. So that being said, Rocket Flip is on a hiatus until I can solve the problem, and I'll keep you guys updated. But cross your fingers. Since I know roughly where the problem is, I may be able to solve it. But as these things go, hopefully. Here's 5 seconds of Misty. Come here, kitten. To cheer you up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hi. But that's really where we're at. And wish me luck. If you've had this kind of error and you have a good way around it, let me know down in the comments, because I've had to deal with this before, and I've been able to solve similar problems before, but this one's kind of kicking my butt. So any help's great. Anyways, fingers crossed, and I shall see you next time.